The galaxy had been quiet for so long that most civilizations believed silence was the natural order of things. For centuries, empires rose and fell across the stars without a whisper from the distant blue planet that had once been marked quarantined on ancient star maps. Humanity, they said, was gone, wiped out by their own wars, consumed by the greed that had destroyed countless other species before them. To the Galactic Council, Earth was just another failed world, a footnote in history. But one night, the silence broke. It began with a transmission, short, distorted, and impossible to trace. It bypassed security firewalls, ignored encryption layers, and appeared simultaneously in over 2,000 star systems. No one saw it coming. One moment, the stars were quiet. The next, every comms array, every projection screen, every piece of advanced technology across the galaxy flickered to life. A single message pulsed through the void, translated automatically by every known linguistic system. The voice was human, calm, confident, and terrifyingly clear. "This is Earth," it said. "We're coming." The word sent a chill through the galaxy. On the capital world of the Varn Dominion, entire sectors went dark as communication officers scrambled to confirm the source. In the trading hubs of the outer rings, merchants whispered to each other, remembering the old stories, the ones about a savage, unpredictable species that fought extinction and won. In the war rooms of the Council, the oldest beings in the galaxy exchanged nervous glances. They had built an empire on the assumption that humanity was gone forever. If they were wrong, then the balance of power was about to break. The first to respond were the Sirathi, cold, logical, and technologically superior. Their fleets had crushed rebellions across 4 sectors without losing a ship. To them, the message was nothing more than a prank, a trick played by some backwater pirate group. They traced the signal to an empty quadrant, a region of dead stars where no life had been detected in millennia. They sent a scouting fleet, 70 ships strong, equipped with the best sensors and weapons the galaxy had ever built. None returned. The last recording recovered from the fleet's black boxes showed a distorted image, a fleet emerging from the shadows, human ships that shouldn't have existed. They didn't look like the sleek cruisers of the galactic powers. They were dark, angular, built for war. Their hulls bore no markings, no insignias, just one symbol, an old blue circle with white stars, the symbol of a long-dead planet. The recording ended with static and a single line of audio, barely audible but clear enough to freeze every council member who heard it. "You had your turn." In the days that followed, fear spread faster than light. The council called an emergency meeting, gathering the leaders of 12 empires under one roof for the first time in 500 years. The atmosphere was tense. Accusations flew, treaties were questioned, and alliances began to fracture. Some believed humanity had returned to seek revenge for the exile centuries ago, the moment when Earth was cast out of the galactic community after refusing to obey council law. Others thought it was a new faction using humanity's name as a symbol of rebellion, but the truth was far stranger. Far beyond the edge of mapped space, in a region where sensors failed and starlight dimmed, humanity had been watching. They had not died out. They had evolved. The wars that nearly destroyed them had forced unity, not extinction. Nations had vanished, replaced by a single command network, the Terran Union. For generations, they rebuilt in the dark, mining dead worlds, harvesting abandoned technology, reverse engineering alien relics, and preparing for the day they would return. They had learned from every empire that had once looked down on them, taking the best and discarding the rest, and now they were ready. Their scouts had been among the stars for decades, gathering intelligence, mapping enemy positions, and studying galactic weaknesses. To most species, humans were myths. To a few, they were ghosts that haunted forgotten systems. But to the Union, this was just the beginning. The first message, "We're coming," was not a threat. It was a warning. The Council tried to respond with diplomacy. Messages of peace, of negotiation, of misunderstanding were sent into the void. None were answered. Then, 2 weeks after the first transmission, a second signal appeared. This time, it wasn't just words, it was proof. Every major world in the core systems received a visual feed from deep space, hundreds of ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were not approaching. They were waiting. At first glance, their fleet seemed small compared to the vast armadas of the galactic powers. But there was something unsettling about them. Their weapons glowed with unfamiliar energy, their engines burned brighter than any known drive, and their movements were too precise, too human. The observers noted something else. Each ship carried the same insignia, but this time it was accompanied by a new phrase written across their hulls in bold letters: "For Earth, for humanity." Panic spread through the galactic networks. Civilizations that had not seen war in generations began to arm themselves again. Some prepared defenses, others sent envoys begging for mercy. The most powerful empires gathered fleets, convinced they could intimidate this returning species back into silence. They didn't understand yet. Humanity wasn't looking for conquest. They were reclaiming their place among the stars, and they intended to do it on their own terms. Among the returning fleet, one ship stood at the center, its hull twice the size of any dreadnought in existence. From its command bridge, a single voice issued orders with calm precision. "No aggression unless fired upon. Record all transmissions. Make sure they know why we're here." The crew obeyed, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the console screens. Most were born off-world, descendants of those who had fled centuries ago. But every one of them carried the same purpose: to remind the galaxy who humanity truly was. Across the Council worlds, people gathered around screens, watching in silence as the human fleet drifted just beyond the edge of their territory. Then the feed cut to black, replaced by one final broadcast. It was the same voice as before, calm and steady. "You thought we were gone. You erased us from your history. You called us dangerous, unpredictable, unfit for your galaxy. But you were wrong. We've seen your wars. We've studied your empires. And now we're done hiding. This is not an invasion. It's a return." And this time, the transmission paused. Static crackled for a long, tense moment. Every listening post across the galaxy went silent. Then the voice finished, lower and colder than before. "We make the rules." The message ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence once more. But this time, it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence before something unstoppable began. Somewhere deep in the void, engines roared to life, and the light of human ships spread across the stars like the dawn of a new era. No one could predict what would come next. But every empire, every ruler, every observer knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity was back. And the galaxy would never be the same again. For weeks after the message, the galaxy held its breath. Trade routes slowed to a crawl. News channels across every world replayed the same footage, those dark, silent human ships floating at the edge of Council space. Every expert tried to explain it away. Some said it was a trick, a digital illusion meant to spark panic. Others argued it was an ancient human artifact, activated after centuries of dormancy. But the one thing no one could explain was how the fleet was still there, visible on every long-range scan, neither advancing nor retreating, waiting. In the council chambers, unease grew like a spreading shadow. The senior delegates gathered again, their faces grim under the glow of the central hollow table. The Chancellor of the Galactic Council, an ancient being whose kind had ruled for millennia, broke the silence first. "They are testing us," it said in a voice like breaking stone. "They want to see how we react." The others murmured in agreement, though none dared to admit the fear they felt. For all their power and technology, the Council had no idea what they were up against. Humanity's last official records were over 400 years old, outdated data from a primitive species that had barely reached the stars. But the ships they now saw were nothing like the clumsy vessels of old Earth history. These new ones had engines that defied known physics, armor that bent sensors, and weapons that registered energy readings far beyond current limits. Something had changed out there in the dark. Meanwhile, across the outer rim, rumors spread faster than light. Smugglers claimed to have seen human scouts near abandoned stations. Miners spoke of strange beacons lighting up dead worlds. A few even claimed they'd received transmissions, coded messages that simply said, "Prepare." No one knew what it meant, but everyone could feel the tension building. It wasn't war yet, but it was close. Far beyond Council space, deep inside the Terran Union's command network, preparations were already underway. Inside the command chamber of the flagship, the glow of 1,000 data streams painted the air in blue light. The officers worked in silence, reviewing reports, monitoring the galaxy's response. They had waited generations for this moment. Every step had been planned, every move calculated. Humanity's reemergence was not a reckless act. It was a test of resolve. At the center of the room stood the fleet commander, watching the distant stars through the massive observation window. The galaxy looked peaceful from here, calm, endless, beautiful. But he knew better. He had been raised on the history of exile, the stories of betrayal when Earth was cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Back then, humanity had been desperate, fractured, begging for recognition. When the Council declared them unfit, it had condemned billions to isolation. But that isolation had forged something powerful. It had taught humanity how to survive without help. Behind him, a communications officer spoke softly. "Transmission requests from the Council are increasing. They're asking for dialogue again." The commander didn't turn. "Let them ask." "We're not ready to talk yet." The officer hesitated. "Sir, they're frightened. Some of the smaller worlds are already offering alliances." That earned a faint smile. "Fear makes quick friends. But real understanding takes time. We'll wait." The Union wasn't looking for open war, not yet. They needed to understand the new galaxy first. The maps they once relied on were centuries out of date. Empires had shifted, species had vanished, and new powers had risen. Humanity had returned stronger but not reckless. Every fleet movement, every signal was deliberate. The warning had been sent, but the true plan was still unfolding behind layers of secrecy known only to the highest command. On the other side of the galaxy, in the industrial heart of the Varn Dominion, the effect of the human return was immediate and devastating. The Varn had been one of the leading powers in the Council, their fleets unmatched in both size and speed. But now, paranoia gripped their leaders. The loss of the 70-ship expedition had shattered their image of superiority. Factories roared day and night, producing new warships. Propaganda filled every screen, calling for unity against the human threat. Among the Varn's military ranks, younger officers whispered doubts. Some wondered if humanity truly sought revenge, or if the Council had simply driven them to this point centuries ago. The official history taught that Earth was exiled for violence, but private archives hinted at another truth, that the Council had feared humanity's potential more than its aggression. Even within the Council itself, cracks were starting to show. Smaller member species began to question their allegiance. Why should they fight a war against a species that hadn't fired a single shot? The humans had spoken only once, and yet their silence afterward carried more weight than any threat. Some even saw opportunity. If the humans truly possessed such technology, perhaps alliances could shift in their favor. On a lonely frontier station orbiting a dying sun, a technician sat in a darkened control room staring at a flickering screen. For hours, his sensors had been picking up faint signals, too weak to identify but too consistent to ignore. He finally adjusted the filters, and the signal cleared. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of faint blips moving in perfect formation. No known transponder codes. No visible identification. He activated the distress channel. "This is Station 9 Beta," he said, voice trembling. "Unidentified contacts detected. Requesting confirmation." The reply came seconds later, not from his command base, but from an unknown source. A calm human voice filled the room. "You've seen enough. Power down your array." Before he could react, his screens went black. The station drifted in silence, its systems disabled, its crew staring out at the stars as faint blue lights passed by in the distance. Back in the core worlds, the Council received the report 3 days later. The footage was brief, static, darkness, then those same eerie blue lights moving across the void. It was enough to confirm what everyone feared. Humanity wasn't just waiting at the border anymore. They were moving. Panic meetings erupted. Defense grids were activated, fleets scrambled, alliances renegotiated. Every empire began to prepare for a war they didn't understand. Yet in all their fear and confusion, None of them noticed what was happening in their own systems. Silent infiltration, human intelligence drones, small as insects, had been seeded into the galaxy months before the first warning. They drifted through markets, military outposts, and research labs, gathering data unseen. Humanity didn't need to fight to win the first move. Information was their weapon now. As the weeks passed, the human fleet remained silent, its movements slow and deliberate. But everywhere they appeared, something changed. Starports shut down, communication arrays failed, entire planets went dark for hours without explanation. It was as if the galaxy itself was being tested, one system at a time. The Council demanded answers, but none came. Each world grew more paranoid, more divided. Empires turned their suspicion inward, accusing one another of collaborating with the humans. The balance that had held for centuries began to crumble. In the deep void, aboard the flagship, the commander received the latest report. The operation was working exactly as planned. The galaxy was tearing itself apart out of fear. He looked down at the ancient symbol engraved on his console, the circle of blue and white stars. The same emblem that once represented a fragile world, now a symbol of something far greater. He turned to his officers. "They'll make the first move soon," he said quietly. "And when they do, we'll be ready." Outside, through the vast windows of the bridge, the galaxy stretched endlessly ahead. Thousands of human ships moved in silent formation, their engines glowing like distant suns. They didn't need to announce themselves anymore. The galaxy already knew. And somewhere, on a forgotten world that once called itself Earth, something stirred beneath the planet's surface. A signal being prepared, one that would shake the stars again. The silence that had returned was temporary. Everyone in the galaxy could feel it, the stillness before a storm. Humanity had warned them once. The next time they spoke, it wouldn't be a warning. It would be the beginning. The first open confrontation began quietly, almost by accident. A small patrol vessel from the Varn Dominion crossed into a restricted zone near the human fleet's observation perimeter. According to the official report, they were running a routine scan. But everyone knew it was deliberate, a test of nerve. The patrol's commander believed the humans would simply ignore them as they had ignored the Council's countless messages. He was wrong. Sensors across the sector picked up a sudden spike in energy. In less than 3 seconds, the Varn ship vanished from every radar. No explosion, no debris, just silence. The Council tried to cover it up, but word spread anyway. Every transmission, every rumor, every whisper told the same story. Humanity had drawn the line. And anyone who crossed it would disappear. From that moment, tension ignited across the galaxy like dry grass catching fire. Fleets were mobilized. Treaties were suspended. Some worlds began preparing evacuation routes, fearing total war. Yet even with all the fear, there was something else beneath it. Curiosity. People wanted to understand who humanity had become. What kind of species could hide for centuries, then return stronger than before? In the shadows of this growing chaos, other stories began to unfold. On a mining colony near the edge of neutral space, a young communications engineer intercepted a strange signal. It was faint and coded in an ancient Terran format, one long abandoned even by human standards. She worked in secret to decode it, thinking it might be worth a fortune. What she discovered instead shook her to her core. The signal wasn't a military transmission, it was a distress call. A single human voice repeating, "They're not who you think they are." Before she could report it, the signal went dark. Later that night, 2 unknown ships appeared in orbit above the colony. They didn't fire, didn't threaten, just hovered in silence. By morning, the engineer was gone, and her workstation had been completely erased. Meanwhile, in the Council's inner chambers, fear was turning to division. The member empires could no longer agree on how to handle the crisis. Some demanded immediate military retaliation. Others argued for diplomacy. The Chancellor tried to keep control, but the arguments grew louder every day. Every new piece of intelligence seemed to contradict the last. Some spies reported massive human shipyards hidden inside asteroid fields. Others claimed that humanity had allied with outlaw species living beyond known space. But the most disturbing report suggested something unthinkable. That human influence was already spreading inside the council itself. There were whispers that a few council members were secretly communicating with the Terran Union, trading information in exchange for safety. No one knew who to trust anymore. Even the most loyal advisors began watching each other, suspecting betrayal. Far away within the human fleet, the atmosphere was no calmer. The soldiers and officers, disciplined and focused, still carried uncertainty in their eyes. Many of them had never seen Earth, only heard stories passed down from ancestors who fled before the exile. They believed in the mission, to return, to reclaim dignity. But not everyone agreed with how it was being done. Inside one of the smaller cruisers, a strategist named Rail studied the galaxy's response on his console. "We're pushing them too hard," he said quietly. "They're afraid, yes, but fear makes desperate enemies. We should talk before someone does something stupid." Across the table, a senior officer shook his head. They had centuries to talk. Now they'll listen only when they have no choice. Rail sighed and turned back to his display. The Council's fleet numbers were rising fast. Every day they delayed, the enemy's defenses grew stronger. But the commander's orders were clear: no attacks unless provoked. Humanity's plan wasn't to destroy, it was to expose, to reveal how fragile the so-called Galactic Order really was. Still, doubts began to spread through the ranks. Some wondered if humanity's leaders were truly united, or if hidden agendas existed among them too. Rumors circulated about a secret faction within the Terran Union, one that wanted total control, not peace. No one could prove it, but the unease was spreading. On a distant moon once used as a trade outpost, a small group of council scientists made a discovery that changed everything. Buried deep beneath the surface was an ancient structure emitting energy signatures identical to those of the human fleet. When they drilled into it, they found human technology, modern, precise, and decades newer than what the Council believed humanity could produce. That meant only one thing. Humanity had been active within Council space long before their reappearance. The discovery was classified instantly, but not fast enough. Leaked fragments of the report reached the public, and panic turned to outrage. Protests broke out across the core worlds. Citizens demanded answers. How long had the Council known? How could they allow a species they'd exiled to infiltrate their systems unseen? The truth was simple but terrifying. The Council hadn't known at all. Humanity had been among them for years, invisible and patient. As the pressure mounted, the Chancellor authorized a desperate move. A joint operation of elite strike teams would infiltrate the human perimeter and attempt contact, peaceful if possible, forceful if not. It was a gamble that risked everything. The mission launched under the code name Silent Sky. 5 stealth cruisers, each carrying hundreds of specialists, moved toward the border where the human fleet lingered. Every ship carried translators, diplomats, and enough firepower to defend themselves if it came to that. For 2 days, they moved through the void without incident. On the 3rd day, the human ships appeared. No warning, no transmissions, just silent shadows gliding through space. The commander of the Council team activated open channels. "This is an authorized Council envoy. We request peaceful communication." There was no answer. Then, from the darkness ahead, a single human vessel drifted forward, its hull reflecting the light of distant stars. It stopped just meters from the lead ship. For a moment, it was perfectly still. Then a voice spoke, the same calm tone that had started all of this. "Your Council exiled us. You called us dangerous. You built a galaxy on that lie. Tell me, what makes you think you can talk now?" The Council commander tried to respond, but the transmission cut off. Every screen flickered, every system shut down. The human ship turned slowly, revealing what lay behind it. A massive formation of hidden vessels cloaked until that moment. The strike teams watched in stunned silence as thousands of lights appeared, surrounding them completely. And then, nothing. No attack, no destruction, just containment. The human ships didn't move again. It was a message. Humanity could have destroyed them but chose not to. The strike teams were allowed to retreat unharmed, their systems restored as they crossed back into Council territory. The meaning was clear. Humanity wasn't looking for surrender or forgiveness. They were waiting for something else. Back on the Council's homeworld, chaos erupted. Some saw the event as a gesture of mercy, proof that humanity might still be reasoned with. Others saw it as humiliation, a reminder that the most powerful alliance in the galaxy had just been toyed with. The divisions deepened, and the Chancellor's control began to crumble. At the same time, within the human fleet, new orders arrived. The waiting was over. Phase 2 was beginning. Ships began to move in silence, dispersing into uncharted systems. No one outside the Terran Union Command knew where they were going or why. But one thing was certain. Something vast was in motion. The galaxy watched and waited, trapped between fear and anticipation. And somewhere out in the dark, among the drifting stars, an old transmission replayed on a forgotten frequency. They're not who you think they are. Who was the message really about, the humans or the Council itself? No one knew. But the answer, when it came, would decide the fate of every world in the galaxy. Across the galaxy, the silence was heavier than ever. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the breath held before the storm. The Council's fleets now lined every border, their ships armed and positioned, their commanders tense and sleepless. Entire worlds had gone into lockdown, preparing for an event no one could describe. Only fear. Every government broadcasted messages of calm, but everyone could feel the truth in the air. Something was coming, and it would change everything. In the council chambers, arguments had turned to shouting. Reports from the border arrived every hour. Sightings of human ships vanishing and reappearing. Unknown signals pulsing across deep space. Planets losing contact for minutes and then suddenly coming back online as if nothing had happened. The Council's intelligence division admitted they no longer had full control of their communication network. Something, or someone, was inside their systems. The Chancellor stood before the grand hollow table, surrounded by flickering images of nervous leaders. "We are facing an invisible war," the Chancellor said, voice trembling slightly. "Every system they touch bends to their will. They're not attacking, but they are everywhere." One of the Dominion generals slammed a clawed hand against the table. "Then let us strike first. End this now before it spreads." But the Chancellor shook its head. "You saw what happened to the last fleet that crossed their line. We cannot afford another disappearance." In the back of the room, a younger delegate spoke quietly. "Maybe the humans aren't the threat. Maybe they're warning us about something worse." The chamber fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the general laughed bitterly. A convenient excuse. "They return after centuries, take control of our systems, and we are supposed to believe they're helping us?" But the words lingered. The mysterious distress signal, the infiltrations that seemed more like observation than sabotage, it all pointed to a truth no one wanted to consider. Perhaps humanity's goal wasn't revenge or conquest. Perhaps they were preparing for something even the Council didn't understand. Meanwhile, in the Terran fleet's command ship, the atmosphere had shifted. The crew moved faster, tension visible in every motion. The commander stood before the central screen, studying dozens of projections of Council worlds. Red markers blinked across the map, spreading like sparks across a dark canvas. "Phase 2 is nearly complete," an officer reported. "All infiltration nodes active. We're inside their defense networks on 6 major worlds." The commander nodded but didn't look away from the screen. "And the others?" "Unstable. The Dominion's main fleet has doubled in strength. Their flagship is preparing to launch. Let them," the commander said quietly. "They'll reveal themselves soon enough." He turned toward the window, watching the distant light of stars. "We're almost there. Once they make the first move, the truth will surface. And then, no one will be able to hide anymore." Deep inside the ship, Rael sat alone in the strategy room, replaying the data from the Council envoy incident. He couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling beyond what they were told. He'd joined the Union to help humanity return, not to plunge the galaxy into chaos. But now, with every passing hour, it seemed like the line between justice and vengeance was fading. A quiet voice broke his thoughts. "Still doubting the mission?" It was one of the intelligence officers leaning against the doorway. "I'm questioning the cost," Rael said without turning. "We said we wouldn't start a war, but we're pushing them into one. If we wanted peace, We wouldn't be moving fleets in every direction. The officer's tone hardened. You've seen what they did to Earth. You know what they'll do if we show weakness again. We're not the same humans they exiled. We're the result of their arrogance. Rael looked at the glowing data lines across the screen. And if we've become what they feared all along? The officer didn't answer. The silence between them said enough. Outside the ship, space shimmered as the fleet shifted positions. The humans had begun to move into formation, not for invasion, but for revelation. Massive communication relays unfolded like wings, connecting across thousands of light years. Data streams pulsed between them, creating a network powerful enough to broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every inhabited world would soon hear the same message at the same time. But before they could activate it, the galaxy blinked. For the first time in months, every human ship went dark. The blue lights that had always glowed on their hulls vanished. The Council's tracking systems lost them all at once. Even the Terran fleet's internal communications dropped into static. Panic rippled through the ranks. In the Council war room, alarms blared. They're gone! Every signal from the human fleet has vanished. Gone where? The Chancellor demanded. No idea, replied the technician. It's as if they've slipped into another dimension. There's no trace, no drive signature, nothing. Across the galaxy, people stared at empty skies, wondering what humanity had done. Then, without warning, the stars themselves began to change. A ripple of light swept through the night, soft at first, then growing stronger. It wasn't an explosion, but a wave of energy spreading outward. Every world it touched experienced the same thing. Their skies filled with light, and for a few seconds, they saw something impossible. It looked like a massive symbol projected across the heavens, a circle of blue and white stars, the ancient emblem of Earth. Then beneath it, words appeared in every known language. The truth will be seen. The wave vanished as quickly as it came, but its impact was immediate. On the Council's central world, thousands of people took to the streets, demanding to know what the message meant. Across the Dominion, riots erupted as citizens questioned their leaders' lies. In the outer colonies, hidden transmitters began activating, sending coded messages into deep space. Something had been set in motion and no one could stop it. Back on the Terran flagship, power flickered back to life. The crew scrambled to restore systems. What was that? Rael shouted. The commander's expression was unreadable. The beginning, he said quietly. The network is online. He opened a private channel, linking to the deep core stations hidden within uncharted systems. Proceed with the reveal. Let them see. Across the galaxy, screens lit up again. News feeds, government systems, personal devices. The transmission bypassed every firewall, every network defense. And this time it wasn't a warning. It was evidence. Images filled the screens. Ancient records, classified archives, forgotten data showing the truth of Earth's exile. The Council hadn't banished humanity for violence. They'd exiled them out of fear. Humanity had discovered something the Council wanted to bury, a secret about the origin of the galaxy itself. The footage showed ruins beneath the surface of Mars, alien structures older than the stars, proof that the Council's species hadn't been the first to rise. Humanity had found the remains of something that didn't belong to any known race. And when they refused to hand it over, the Council branded them dangerous and sealed Earth away. Now, centuries later, the truth was no longer theirs to hide. The galaxy erupted in chaos. Entire civilizations turned against the Council. Empires fractured overnight. On the Dominion's capital world, their own citizens stormed government buildings demanding answers. And through it all, the human fleet watched silently, their role complete, for now. But the commander knew this wasn't the end. It was the breaking point. The Council wouldn't surrender their power easily. And whatever humanity had discovered centuries ago, the thing buried beneath the red sands of Mars, wasn't just history. It was something alive, something waiting. As the stars shifted outside, Rael finally understood. The humans hadn't come back just to reclaim their honor. They had come back because they knew what was coming next, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Far below, on a forgotten outpost orbiting a dying sun, one of the Council's secret research stations detected an anomaly. A faint signal, identical to the one humanity had sent at the beginning, was pulsing again. Only this time it wasn't coming from the human fleet. It was coming from beyond the edge of the galaxy. The signal repeated once before cutting off. "We're coming!" And for the first time, even humanity didn't know who it was meant for. The signal spread across the stars like a ghost, repeating once before vanishing into static. Every listening post, every sensor array, every human and alien world that caught even a fragment of it froze in disbelief. The transmission was unmistakably similar to humanity's own. Same structure, same tone, same haunting clarity. Only this time, it didn't come from any known human source. It came from beyond the galactic rim, from a region so distant that no species had ever returned from exploring it. The human command network immediately went into lockdown. The flagship's comms deck flickered with alerts, data streams colliding as officers tried to trace the signal's origin. Rael watched the readings in silence, his chest tight with unease. The coordinates didn't make sense. No relay stations, no habitable systems, not even a known star cluster existed in that sector. It was, by all accounts, empty space. But something was there, something powerful enough to send a message across the entire galaxy. The commander stepped into the room, eyes fixed on the main display. "Is it a repeat of our own transmission?" "Almost," Rael said quietly. "But there's a difference. Our signal carried human encryption. This one doesn't. It's older." That word hung in the air like a shadow. Older. The meaning was clear to everyone in the room. Humanity had once uncovered relics buried beneath Mars, structures not of their making. If this signal came from the same source, it meant that whatever had been buried there wasn't just ancient, it was awake. Outside, the human fleet began to shift, forming new defensive patterns. Orders spread silently across the Union's communication grid, unseen by the Council's scanners. Humanity wasn't preparing for an attack anymore. They were bracing for something else. Across the galaxy, panic rippled like a tidal wave. The Council believed it was a human trick, a new stage in their psychological war. They released emergency statements calling for unity against Terran deception, but the truth couldn't be contained. The signal had been detected by too many worlds, translated into too many languages. The message was the same for all. "We're coming." It didn't say who he was. Inside the council chambers, chaos ruled. Leaders shouted over each other, demanding immediate military action. "If the humans didn't send it," one of them roared, "then what else could? No known civilization exists beyond the rim." The Chancellor's voice trembled as it replied, "Perhaps that's why it's coming from there." In the human command network, a similar unease spread. Reports flooded in from observation posts scattered across the galaxy, strange energy spikes near dead worlds, gravitational anomalies along hyperspace lanes, and objects moving faster than any known drive system. It was as if something massive was entering their galaxy, and the old borders of space no longer meant anything. The commander gathered his senior officers in the main strategy hall. The lights were dim, the air thick with tension. "We've spent centuries preparing to return," he said, voice steady but heavy. "But it seems we were not the only ones waiting." Rael glanced at him. "You think this is connected to what was buried under Mars?" "I don't think," the commander replied. "I know." He activated the central display. The holographic map lit up, showing the distant edge of the galaxy. Dozens of faint markers blinked where new energy readings had been detected. Each pulse synchronized perfectly with the mysterious signal. "The ancient structures on Mars were built by something that came before the Council," he continued. "Before us. The Council silenced Earth because we found proof that the galaxy's history began with a lie. They feared what we would uncover. But now, whatever they feared is awake." The room fell silent. Even the steady hum of the ship's systems felt louder than usual. "What do we do?" an officer asked quietly. The commander didn't answer at first. His gaze was distant, lost in the sea of starlight outside. "We find it before they do," he said finally. "And we learn what it wants." Across the galaxy, the Council was already mobilizing. Massive fleets gathered along the outer sectors, arming for a confrontation they didn't understand. Worlds that had spent generations in peace now prepared for their first interstellar war in centuries. The media across thousands of planets broadcast urgent bulletins about the unknown threat beyond the rim, and whispers of extinction began to circulate. In the chaos, smaller species began to turn toward humanity, not out of trust, but out of desperation. Secret envoys reached the Terran Union, offering information, technology, anything in exchange for protection. For the first time, the Council's power was breaking apart from within, but the humans had little time for politics. The closer their scouts got to the rim, the stranger the data became. Space itself seemed unstable there, distorted, bending sensors and tearing navigation systems apart. Several ships vanished entirely, leaving only fragmented transmissions that spoke of shadows in the light and voices that weren't human. On the command bridge, Rael reviewed the recordings late into the night. The voices were faint, almost whispers, repeating fragments of phrases. He enhanced the audio, filtering through static. Beneath the noise, he caught something that made his blood run cold. "Humanity," the voice said. "You woke us." He froze, replaying it again and again, hoping he'd misheard. But the message was clear. Whatever was coming knew them by name. When he brought the discovery to the commander, the man's face hardened. "We were never supposed to reach the rim," he murmured. "That's what the Council feared all along." "What if this isn't about revenge anymore?" Rael asked. "What if it's survival?" The commander nodded slowly. Then for the first time in history, the galaxy will need humanity, not to conquer but to endure. The days that followed blurred into constant motion. Every ship in the Terran fleet was put on high alert. Scouts were recalled, and the main fleet began moving toward the galactic edge. In the distance, massive distortions flickered across the void, flashes of light like gateways tearing open between stars. The Council, still convinced it was a human deception, deployed their largest armada to intercept. Billions watched from their homeworlds as the two greatest forces in known history, the Council's fleet and humanity's, moved toward the same point in space. But what awaited them there wasn't each other. When the fleets arrived, their scanners picked up something beyond comprehension, a structure larger than any moon, made of black metal that seemed to absorb light itself. It drifted slowly, its surface covered in patterns that pulsed like veins. And at its center, a faint blue glow, the same color as Earth's ancient signal. Then, without warning, every ship, human and Council alike, received the same transmission. The voice was neither human nor alien. It was calm, ancient, and vast. "You have repeated our mistake," it said. "You built empires on what you did not understand. The cycle begins again." Before anyone could respond, the structure emitted a wave of energy that spread across the fleets, disabling every system. Ships went dark. Engines failed. Even communication fell silent. For a moment, the galaxy's greatest powers were nothing but drifting shadows in the dark. On the Terran flagship, emergency lights flickered on. Rael struggled to reboot the systems, his hands shaking. Through the viewport, he saw the enormous structure turn slowly, aligning itself toward the galaxy's center. And then, impossibly, it began to move. The commander's voice was grim. "It's not just a relic," he whispered. "It's alive." Outside, smaller fragments began to break away from the main body, hundreds of them, spreading like seeds across the void. Each fragment pulsed with light, heading toward inhabited worlds. Rael stared in horror. "They're not attacking us. They're spreading." The commander turned to him, his eyes filled with the weight of realization. "This is what the Council tried to hide. They weren't afraid of us. They were afraid of them. And now we've brought them back." The lights flickered again as the structure vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind only silence and an echo of that terrible voice. In that silence, both the humans and the Council understood the truth. The galaxy wasn't facing a war between species anymore. It was facing something older, something that once ruled the stars long before any of them existed. And it was awake again. The fleets drifted helplessly in the aftermath, engines still failing, sensors still blind. And in that cold stillness, a single new signal began to pulse through the void, a whisper, soft but unmistakable. "Humanity," it said. You started this. Now finish it." And with those words, the galaxy's greatest conflict truly began. Rael's heart pounded. "If you created us, then you know what we are capable of. We won't let you erase us." The blue light flared, and the voice replied, almost gently, "We do not erase. We integrate." The surface of the fragment opened, revealing a core of swirling energy. Inside, he could see images, visions of Earth, of human faces, cities, oceans, all dissolving into streams of light. It wasn't destruction. It was assimilation. They were turning life into data, into part of themselves. The commander's voice came through the comm, distorted but urgent. "Rael, get out of there! They're pulling energy from the planet. Its crust is destabilizing." But Rael didn't move. He was transfixed by what he saw inside the core. Within the shifting light, he caught glimpses of the Martian ruins humanity had discovered centuries ago. The same architecture, the same symbols, and buried among them, recordings of human DNA. "They didn't just create the galaxy," Rael whispered. "They created us." Back on the flagship, the commander froze. The realization hit like thunder. The reason humanity's biology was unique, the reason they had advanced so rapidly after exile, was because they carried remnants of this ancient race within them. The Council hadn't feared human aggression. They had feared that humans might be the key to awakening the old builders, and now they had. The fragment's energy began to surge, tendrils of light reaching toward Rael. His suit alarms blared as he was lifted from the ground, suspended within the glow. "You carry our design," the voice said. "You are the bridge between what was and what will be. Through you, we will begin anew." Rael screamed through the comm. "Fire on my coordinates!" The commander's hands tightened into fists. "That will kill you! Do it!" Rael shouted. "If they use me, it's over for everyone." There was no time to hesitate. The commander gave the order. The flagship's main cannons lit up, firing concentrated plasma toward the fragment. The impact shook the surface of the planet, tearing the fragment apart in a blinding explosion of light. When the smoke cleared, the fragment was gone, and so was Rael. The planet's surface fell silent, the glowing veins fading one by one until the world was dark again. On the flagship, the crew stared at the readings. The remaining fragments across the galaxy had all stopped moving. It was as if destroying that one piece had disrupted the entire network. The commander exhaled slowly, the weight of what they had done sinking in. But before relief could settle, a new signal appeared on the screen. Faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't alien this time. It was human. The voice that came through was Rael's. "You didn't destroy them," it said. "You connected them. They're not gone. They're inside the network now, and I'm with them." The commander's eyes widened. "Rael?" For hours, the galaxy was silent again. Ships drifted powerless, trapped between stars, their systems fried by the wave that came from the colossal structure. Even the stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if the light had been drained from space. Humanity's fleet floated near the Council's shattered formation. Two enemies united by something they could neither fight nor flee from. On the Terran flagship, the emergency lights glowed faintly as Rael worked to restore the ship's systems. Every flicker of the console felt like a heartbeat, every spark a reminder that life was still clinging on. When the power finally returned, the command deck lit up in soft blue light. Static filled the comm channels, then cleared just enough for a weak transmission to cut through. It was a Council admiral, voice shaking, pleading for cooperation. "We're losing worlds," the voice said. "Those fragments, whatever they are, they're spreading across colonies. They aren't attacking, but they're changing things." The commander listened without speaking, eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the galaxy. The map was lit with thousands of pulsing dots, each one representing a fragment of the alien structure. They were moving fast, heading toward the core worlds, both human and alien alike. "We'll work together," the commander said finally. "For now." Rael looked at him. "And after?" "There may not be an after," he replied quietly. They reactivated the Terran drive and began their approach toward the nearest fragment. It was orbiting a barren planet, motionless except for the faint rhythm of blue light running across its surface. As they neared, their instruments began to distort, reading impossible gravitational values. The commander ordered a shuttle team to prepare. Rail volunteered immediately. He had to see it up close to understand what had awakened. The shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere, the landscape below covered in glowing veins of light that spread from the fragment like roots burrowing into the ground. The air hummed faintly, almost like a whisper. When they landed, Rail stepped out and felt it, a vibration beneath his boots, a pulse in sync with his heartbeat. The fragment wasn't just metal, it was alive. As he approached, the surface rippled like liquid glass. His scanner flickered and died, but not before displaying one final word: synchronizing. Then a voice echoed in his mind. Not through sound, but through thought. Humanity. You were the last to evolve, the last to forget. Rail staggered back. What are you? He whispered aloud. The voice replied, calm and ancient. We are what remains of the first civilization. We built the stars, shaped the life that came after, and buried ourselves when creation turned against us. You called us gods once. Then you stopped believing. The truth struck him like a physical blow. These weren't invaders. They were creators, beings that had once engineered the very foundations of life across galaxies. And now, they were reclaiming it. Back on the flagship, the commander monitored Rail's vitals from the bridge. The readings spiked wildly, then steadied. He's in contact, one of the officers said. But not physically. It's something deeper. Keep the line open, the commander ordered. We need to know what they want. Rail tried to focus through the haze of energy around him. Why now, he asked. Why return? Because your kind woke the memory of what we lost, the voice said. The signal you sent, the warning, it reached us across time. You were not calling to conquer. You were calling for purpose. And now the cycle begins again. I see everything, the voice continued, calm yet distant. They weren't trying to take us. They were trying to become us. Humanity was their evolution, and now we're merging. Don't fight it. Guide it. The communication ended. Outside, the stars shimmered strangely, their light bending as if space itself was breathing. Across the galaxy, systems began to reboot. Council ships reactivated. Terran engines roared back to life. The fragments had vanished, but their energy lingered, woven into every circuit, every pulse of power. Then, something extraordinary happened. Data streams across the fleets began to change, repairing, optimizing, rewriting themselves. Technology improved in seconds, far beyond known limits. Ships that had been crippled moments ago now hummed with renewed energy. It was as if the ancient builders had left a gift behind, a seed of their power, through Rail's sacrifice. The commander stood at the viewport, watching the distant stars flicker. He did it, he whispered. He gave them what they wanted without letting them win. But even as the galaxy stabilized, a faint transmission began repeating across the void, on the same frequency as humanity's original warning. It was Rail's voice again, calm and distant, carried by the stars themselves. Don't repeat our mistakes, it said. The galaxy is awake now. And then, silence. The Council and humanity formed an uneasy truce in the months that followed. Together, they began rebuilding, sharing technology that was no longer fully their own. Every system, every ship now carried a spark of that ancient intelligence, quiet, watching, guiding. Some feared it, others worshipped it, but all knew one truth. The galaxy had changed forever. As the Terran flagship drifted past the ruins of the last fragment, the commander looked out into the endless dark and whispered, We sent a warning once. We're coming. But maybe we were never the ones returning. Maybe they were. And somewhere beyond the stars, in the space between thought and creation, Rail's voice echoed one last time, soft, human, and infinite. We're still here. In the weeks after the light faded, the galaxy began to breathe again. The stars that had dimmed slowly returned to their natural brightness, and the emptiness that had hung over every world lifted. Across the scattered colonies of both the Council and the Terran Union, systems flickered back online, fleets re-established contact, and for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy stood still, not in fear, but in realization. Humanity had survived. The Council had survived. and something older than both had been awakened but transformed. On the Terran flagship, the commander sat alone in the observation deck, staring at the curve of a distant sun. It was quiet now. Too quiet. The sound of engines and distant chatter had become faint, as though the ship itself was trying to absorb what had happened. In the reflection of the glass, he could still see the fading echo of Rael's last transmission, replaying in his memory. "We're still here." Those words had carried through every human relay, every alien station, embedding themselves into every signal across the galaxy. The engineers were still trying to understand the new systems that had appeared within their ships. The technology was different, cleaner, faster, alive. It adapted to their needs without command. Artificial intelligence cores once dependent on programming now seemed to think on their own, though never with malice. It was as if Rael's consciousness, merged with the ancient builders, had rewritten the foundations of technology itself. Humanity hadn't conquered the stars this time. They had become part of them. Reports from the outer colonies began arriving in fragments. Planets once scarred by war now showed signs of regeneration. The strange energy left behind by the ancient structures was reshaping the soil, healing the damage caused by centuries of industrial decay. Crops grew faster. Air grew cleaner. Even in the ruins of old battlefields, new life had started to take root. Scientists didn't know whether to call it evolution or intervention. The commander didn't care. For the first time in generations, life was thriving again. The council convened weeks later, not in their old chambers, but aboard a neutral platform orbiting a quiet world. Humanity was invited, not as outcasts, but as equals. The chancellor, older and humbled, stood before the assembly and addressed them in a tone few had ever heard from a council leader. "The galaxy has changed," she said. "We thought we were the masters of creation, the judges of what species deserved survival. We were wrong. Humanity's warning reached the stars, and in answering it, something greater reminded us of our place." Her words were met with silence at first, then with quiet nods. No one argued. The arrogance that once fueled centuries of division was gone. They had all seen what had awakened beyond the rim. They had all felt the weight of something that had built worlds before they could even walk upright. When it was humanity's turn to speak, the commander stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. "We didn't send that warning to start a war. We sent it because we were tired of being forgotten. We wanted to remind the galaxy that we were still alive. But maybe it wasn't the galaxy that needed the reminder. Maybe it was us." There were no cheers, no applause, only quiet understanding. Every species present had seen what the humans had risked, what Rael had given up. For the first time in galactic memory, peace didn't feel like a fragile truce. It felt earned. Months passed. The Terran Union and the Council began to rebuild together. Mixed crews operated joint research ships, exploring the ancient ruins now found on dozens of worlds. Everywhere they looked, the same patterns repeated, symbols of unity, creation, and renewal. It became clear that the old builders hadn't just created life. They had designed it to learn from its mistakes, to grow, and to evolve beyond conflict. In the midst of reconstruction, strange occurrences continued to appear, soft, human-like whispers in data streams, flickers of blue light within computer cores, a faint pulse beneath the surface of new technology. Many engineers dismissed it as residual code or static interference, but those who had known Rael believed otherwise. They said it was his presence, watching, guiding, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. One night, as the flagship cruised near the edge of a newly restored trade route, the commander stood once more at the observation deck. Below, the stars shimmered in familiar patterns, but now each glowed faintly with a hue of blue, the same energy that had once threatened to consume them. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a sign of balance. He remembered the wars, the fear, the isolation that had once defined humanity's place among the stars. They had been exiled, silenced, dismissed as dangerous. And yet, in the end, it was their persistence, their refusal to give up, that had saved not only themselves but everyone. Humanity's legacy was not destruction. It was survival through unity. As he stared into the endless dark, a soft chime echoed through the ship's console. A message appeared marked as untraceable. Only one line of text filled the screen. "The cycle is complete. Build better this time." Then it vanished, leaving the faint afterglow of Rail's old signal pattern. The commander smiled, a rare expression on a man who had carried so much weight. "We will," he whispered. "I promise." In the years that followed, the galaxy entered what historians would later call the era of renewal. Planets once hostile to one another began to trade. Research teams shared discoveries freely. Even the Council, once known for its bureaucracy and control, began to change. They no longer ruled from fear, but from collaboration. And at the heart of every advancement, every new city or colony, was a single phrase carved into stone or metal: "We're coming." It no longer meant conquest. It meant progress, exploration, hope. Children born in this new age grew up hearing stories about how humanity had once been cast out and how they had returned not with vengeance, but with courage. They learned that unity was not found in power, but in understanding. The lesson that Rail's sacrifice had etched into the stars themselves. Even as technology evolved, the mystery of the ancient builders remained unsolved. Some believed they had transcended into another form of existence, becoming one with the galaxy's energy. Others believed they lived on through humanity, their legacy carried in human DNA and now in the systems that powered their ships. Whatever the truth, no one doubted that their influence lingered still, gentle, silent, eternal. On the anniversary of the final battle at the Rim, a new ship was launched. Sleek, white, and powered by hybrid human-alien technology, it bore the name Rail's Promise. Its mission was simple: to explore beyond the known galaxy, to learn what lay beyond the old borders. The commander, now older but still sharp, watched the launch from a quiet outpost near Mars. As the ship disappeared into the stars, he felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. Humanity had come full circle. They were no longer exiles, no longer warriors searching for vengeance. They were explorers again, just as they had been in their earliest days. As the stars shimmered above him, a final pulse of blue light flickered faintly in the night sky. It was soft, almost invisible, but he knew what it meant. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a farewell, and somewhere in the deep silence between galaxies, a familiar voice whispered one last time, gentle, human, and proud: "We're home." With those words, the story of humanity's rise, exile, and rebirth closed its final chapter. The galaxy had learned that creation was not meant to be ruled but shared, and humanity, once silenced, had spoken louder than ever, not through war, but through the quiet power of survival and the unbreakable will to begin again.